Hi everyone and welcome to the Neurominds podcast. Today I have the honor to have Isa with me and we are going to discuss about how to embrace self, authenticity and a lot of other very interesting topics. And we met first online and then offline. We had a walk with Montgomery and today I'm really happy to have her here. Maybe you'd like to introduce yourself.
I'm Isabel Stiles and I do identity level transformation through energy and somatic practices.
Amazing. And what led you there?
Long story. So
we have time.
I guess identity and being oneself without the conditioning has been a lifelong journey for me. It certainly started when I was very young. Not being able to be myself at home, I would say. My mother was very strict with what we were able to do growing up. And being a very curious and inquisitive and interested person from a very young age, I was not allowed to do a lot of the different things that my friends were doing, for example. And so over time, I think that sort of pushed me more towards being myself than conforming to what was expected of me at home, which led to then, several years of self-discovery and, who am I, and needing to be closer to myself rather than being further away or, as the term is called, masking. I did quite the opposite. Which had some wonderful results, but also some catastrophic results because I was going against the grain of sometimes society's norms, what's accepted in society. I've led a pretty controversial lifestyle for much of my life as an adult. And that pushes the edge, which is something I've always been very interested in. So it's, the edge of my own mind, for example, what we're capable of as human beings. I've always been very sensitive, even from a child. So sort of going down the shamanic route. So that started in my early 20s. Sensitivity to energy was, even as a child. So there's been lots of different layers to it, effectively. But then also having been in the corporate space for 10 years. So there's been lots of different layers to that.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that you said that at home it was rather strict, but then why is he so needy today? It was strict, but then outside you have been kind of the opposite. Was that like a rebellious move, and was that also maybe tied and connected to hormones, or how would you see that?
I would say maybe an influence of both. My mother would have said that I never grew out of my terrible twos. So I think there's definitely, as soon as I became 17, that's when everything was really problematic at home, for example. That's when I really started pushing the boundaries of needing my own space and my own autonomy, my own agency, my own decisions, my own decisions about what I do with my time and how I spend my time. That led to taking a lot of drugs in my earlier years, which was, as fun as it was also very difficult at periods of time in my 20s. So I would say yes, definitely some hormonal effect there, but a lot more because I think my mother had kept me sort of, I wouldn't say in a box, but certainly in a space that was not allowing me freedom of expression. She was, there was also cultural differences. She was also a very old mum compared to the rest of my year. She had me at 38, my sister at 40. And I was born in 75, so back in those days it was quite significant to have such an older mum. So, and also being Swiss and growing up in the UK, so there were cultural differences there as well. My dad was English. So yes, it was a combination, but definitely more about the fight to just be me and be accepted. And I think it was always a theme at home. I don't feel like I can be me here. I don't feel like I'm accepted here. I don't feel like, at the end of, by the time I was 19, my parents asked me to leave home because it was just so destructive that it was just not possible for me to be at home. It affected my sister obviously a lot as well. So yeah, it was definitely the fight to be me that was causing more of the destruction than anything else. And then my mum going through menopause at the same time as I was hitting my teenage phase. So then that was also sort of a major clash.
Two hormones like coming together.
Personality-wise, yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that and being so open, because I think substance abuse is also something that is very common amongst neurodivergents in different ways. Sometimes it's alcohol, sometimes it's cigarettes, sometimes it's cocaine, MDMA, and whatnot. And I feel that especially when you are so young and you are just trying to navigate yourself, I think unfortunately sometimes it's perceived as a good escape for some time, right? And then when you were asked to leave by the age of 19, I suspect that you haven't had an apprentice or studies or anything conducted yet.
No,
like,
not at all.
what did you do?
So 17, I dropped out of college because my extracurricular activities, we'll call them, were taking priority at the time. So I was very experimental with different drugs. I started smoking at the age of 16. And then by 17 onwards, I was taking speed and ecstasy. And by the time I was 23, 24, it kind of moved on to cocaine. So there was an earlier period where I was very experimental with working. So I worked temporary, which served me well because it was temp, different environments, different experiences. I liked that a lot. I moved up to London when I was 23. I grew up in West Sussex, so it was also, again, a small town. And for me, I felt very, almost a little bit, I don't know the word, suffocated, but I just felt like I didn't have, there was just not, I'd outgrown, I guess, that environment. I wanted more, I wanted to experience more. And London was only an hour away from where I grew up. So I moved up to East London. I started working in a pub, which I absolutely loved, and I'd already been doing bar work anyway in my hometown. And that, of course, fed my need for social dynamics. It was obviously alcohol fueled as well, which was part of the dynamic. And then I got into recruitment, got in specifically into hospitality recruitment and technical recruitment, which I loved. And that was, again, very high stress. A lot of alcohol driven. London anyway is a massive party scene, so that was, I had a fabulous 10 years in London. There was obviously moments that were very difficult and painful as well, but ultimately I had a really, really good 10 years, and at the end I was just like, I got to, I was 33 when I ended up leaving, and part of the reason why I was leaving was because I just needed to get out of this cycle of partying, working, partying, and it was just getting to the point where I was like, okay, I need to do something else with my life now. And that's when I went to Sydney.
Wow.
So yeah, so it was quite a lifestyle change.
Sydney,
But
nice.
yeah. So the beach, so lifestyle change. I had to retrain because I left, I was working at JP Morgan in London at the time, and there was just no available work in Sydney. So I retrained, and then I went into stress management. And then sort of took off from there. So lifestyle changed drastically. And then, of course, by that point, alcohol dropped off, the drugs dropped off, and it was just, nothing, it didn't resonate anymore. But yes, now I know that in my earlier days I was self-medicating, which many of us do in one form or another. So, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that I remember, I lived in London as well, and I was just fascinated, positively and negatively, how much alcohol is being consumed, how many beers you have in one night. and then going to the office the next day. I mean, now 35, turning 36, I definitely could not do that anymore. Even like having drinks on the weekend. I don't know about you, but I was cutting down on alcohol like completely, because I feel like it's really like messing up as well with your mental state of being. Like I have the feeling that alcohol is, the older we get, also like so severe that you can have effects for days, especially when it comes to like anxiety, depression, etc., that can be amplified as well, right? Which is also very typical for neurodivergence. I was reading something about it in terms of research. So yeah, I think cutting down on that is definitely a smart choice. Was it going to be better in Sydney?
Yeah, I mean, Sydney was also very difficult because I'd spent 10 years building up a career, having not had, gone to university, not had an official training or study at that time. There was no, with recruitment, it was you learn, you're doing and learning at the same time. So there was no, it's changed a lot now. But yeah, so 10 years. So I worked at JP. I actually had an offer with Goldman's in Hong Kong, which fell through because of the financial crisis. So it was like, okay, my manager in London, she said to me, what do you want to do? Because you don't want to be in the UK. And I said, plan B, Sydney. So that's what I did. I stayed with JP for another 6 months. And then I went over there, and they had been about 2 or 3 months before that. They had been hit as well. So there were a lot of recruiters on the ground. So, my needs were no longer required with my skill set. So it was really about, okay, what do I do now? I'm certainly not going back to London. I live one street from the beach. I was in Maroubra, which is just beaches south of Bondi. And it was just beautiful. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do with my life now? Where is this going? And what was very noticeable when I'd arrived was my lack of being able to relax. So having spent 10 years in London, very high stress levels, drinking too much, doing too many drugs, not so much the latter years, but certainly still drinking a lot, and just, lying on the beach. And after about 5 minutes, I was sort of tapping my hands. I was like, going, what now? What next? And just not being able to relax. And then I think at some point I just realized how stressed I'd been and how stressed people around me were as well, particularly in those environments. And thinking, actually, we need more of this. We need more stress management. We need to take better care of ourselves. And that's sort of where it grew from there onwards.
That's amazing. And I mean, as well, I think what is very significant in the neurodivergent experience is that neurodivergents are so sensitive. Like taking on the emotions, the stress levels, etc., around us without even consciously noticing, right? But something happens within our nervous system, and I think this is also where the stress management comes in, right? To understand and educate that we all have a nervous system and we have to take care of that. And I would even say that it doesn't matter if neurodivergence or neurotypicals, but I feel that a lot of people have absolutely no clue that they have a nervous system and how to actually calm it. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, with the regulation. Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think certainly from my standpoint, I'm very much a sensation seeker. So, loved nothing more going into a club, taking some ecstasy, dancing for 6 hours solid, and then coming out and feeling completely fried, but just feeling really good. But then, of course, suffering the next few days with the come down and the after effects of it. But then also needing very much alone time, just no stimulation at all. And yeah, I think the sort of the understanding your own boundaries. And I think certainly with neurodivergence, there can be a lack of understanding one's own boundaries, particularly for those that are more sensation seeking as well. Going sort of from one extreme and then to the other. So for me, it was very much about the isolation, cutting off, taking time for myself, whether it be a day or a couple of days, was really about actually calming my nervous system. I actually felt very good, and I liked spending time with myself. I think it's also important, for me anyway, and that's sort of my way of decompressing. But I think also, you know, when I look back, like the 20s anyway, you know, the drive and the energy you have versus I turned 50 last year.
And you don't look like it at all. This is also like a side note that neurodivergents don't look their age. They always look younger, and it's fascinating. Yeah.
And so, and so, you know, so now, you know, it's just not possible. And I think the more I worked with energy and the more I delved into the energetic practices, and the more I did, the less tolerance I had actually for alcohol. So, you know, the days, I mean, I still occasionally have a glass or two of wine, but that's sort of my limit. You know, the days of me going out and going on benders are gone because I just simply cannot. My body just won't allow me to anymore. So I think there is sort of this gradual shift as you get older, that the body, particularly, I mean, if, you know, depending on the direction you go into, if you're used to having that lifestyle, then your body keeps up with it. But when you take into go into another dimensional space with the work, then the body has far less tolerance for it. It just doesn't resonate anymore. It's quite interesting how that happens. I mean, in a good way, of course.
Yeah. No, I think I'm just trying to remember the last time I really had like a big night out with alcohol is a very long time ago. And I also feel 1 or 2 glasses of wine and I'm done. I'm really done. I'm like, I wouldn't be able even to drive the car anymore. It has such an effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah. And you have also been working in corporate for quite some time, right? I think a lot of neurodivergents report that, especially in corporate, they struggle. And it is obviously because in a corporate you have more people working there. You have masses of different departments, people's groups that have to work. So obviously there are more rules, there is a little bit more conformity, etc. How was that for you, and how would you see, if someone would offer you a job in a corporate tomorrow, what would be your, let's say, in terms of accommodation set that you would need or you would see also working with your clients?
I don't think I could, yeah. You know, I've been, since 2008, I've been self-employed. I really enjoyed what I did. I was in-house recruitment, so I did agency side to begin with. But that also gave me a lot of freedom in terms of stimulation, I would call it, just in terms of the stimulation of the work itself. Back in those days, we were humans looking at through CVs. Now it's all changed to AI. I mean, that was probably the part of it that was least interesting for me, was looking through the CVs. I like the people contact very much. But then I moved in-house. So then the agency would then do the pre-screening. And then I was sort of the middle person between the business and the agencies. So I loved that very much. So it was more of a, rather than being very salesy, which I'm not, I'm much more of a nurturer. So that role suited me very well. And I spent around 7 years in-house. In various, it was a contractor, I went contracting very early because again, it gave me the added dimension of different companies, different environments, different technologies. As a tech recruiter, I was with JP for about 2.5 years. That was the longest contract I had. And it was so matrix in there, it was so dynamic in there, there was so much to learn in there, that it kept me engaged. So it gave me enough mental stimulation to stay longer in there. And I worked with some fantastic teams. So I would say that my corporate career was really good. I really enjoyed it. And it was really getting to the point of 33 at that point. I thought I was getting old. older
Wow.
that I needed to do something else with my
Wow.
life. And now
33.
And then it was like, okay, I really need to get out and do something else somewhere else. And of course, I had to kind of give up this partying dynamic because it wasn't shifting being in the environment. I checked myself in for therapy a year before I left Sydney to kind of cut off the cocaine situation. And yeah, and now, just turning 50, I'm like, wow, that was, I was still very young, effectively, and I still feel young now, but yeah, just different.
Yeah.
But that was my mindset at the time. But yeah, the corporate space was good for me. I think it was interesting as well. I worked predominantly in also very male-dominated environments. My team at JP was all women. But then, of course, the IT department at JP was predominantly men. But yeah, I really enjoyed my time. And then, of course, when there was no work available in Sydney, it was, that sort of creativity comes in. The solution finding, problem solving dynamic kicked in. And then it was like, okay, what can I do from here? What's possible? Retraining. Studying for me at school was a nightmare. I came out of school with terrible grades. I just, I didn't fit into the system. So when it came to my working life, I'd say I've been very fortunate because I've chosen where I've gone into. I've had full autonomy and agency with that, but being in school, that was for me was very painful. And I also somehow had an awareness very early on that this was a complete waste of time, that I would not be needing half of this later in life. And I remember having this discussion, and I was very young, I must have been around 10 or 11. And that didn't help because there was, all of this sort of GCSEs to get through and, having that mindset and then not really fitting into the study programs as they were. I also have dyscalculia, by the way, so maths for me was just hellish. And yeah, that was probably the toughest years of my life was school and trying to get through that, actually. But as an adult, where I've had agency, I've had full autonomy on my decisions, it got much easier because I sort of got through the point of, this is me, this is what I like to do, this is what I need to do, this is where I'm coming from. And then it started to flow much more. And I think the drug taking was really an exploration. Yes, self-medicating to a point, but also just, wow, what is this? And of course, I took it to the ultimate extreme in some cases, which, not always very helpful. It was part of the journey.
It's part of the journey.
Yeah, it was really part of the journey. Yeah.
And how would you say, how did you do it in a sense that you created this agency for yourself, but also you needed to have a lot of confidence to choose and to actually do the things that you actually like? Because I think a lot of neurodivergents, they are kind of like pushed into paths they don't have chosen for themselves, but chosen by teachers, other pupils, parents, where everyone is having like a certain level of expectation and this is just the way you go. How did you create that agency? I mean, obviously you've been exploring with drugs, you have been out a lot, you've been asked to leave home when you have been 19, which is quite hard. But how do you see the development of this agency and the confidence along the way?
Good question. I think that for me, I go with my feelings. I try things, they don't work out. I know they don't work out. I try something else. And I'm very much ruled by how something feels. If I'm not sure, I try it out anyway because I don't understand the dynamic here. I almost have to put myself into something to navigate it, to understand what it is. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think that's just been my modus operandi from as long as I've been able to have a say in what I do fully. I'm also very fortunate in many ways that my parents never pushed me into a specific path. There was never a, you have to do this, you have to go to college, you have to do this, you have to do that. There was none of that. The blocks came with my mum, was sort of the growing up, and I wasn't allowed to climb trees, for example, or I wasn't allowed to go out with my friends and do certain things.
Was she scared?
I'm not really sure. Sorry.
Take your time. Take your time.
She passed in 2012. Pancreatic cancer. And, we had 10, I would say probably 10, 15 years, really good years together. We got on very, very well. But the earlier years were just catastrophic. And there was also this sort of, brushing things under the carpet. The family is very much, we don't talk about this, we don't talk about that. For years we didn't even know how old my mum was. When we asked my mum how old she was, she would be like, you don't need to know that. So my mum also came back from trauma. She was terribly traumatized, thank you. Only found out when I was almost 30 what happened. So that was also, everything then made sense, That was also like, okay, now I understand why she was the way she was. So I'm not sure her motivations. She never really talked about it. She was never really open about her feelings. There may well be an element there of her being scared, but it certainly caused, my sister had a different experience, of course, because I learned kind of how not to do things with me. So my sister got to experience her childhood slightly differently. But still compounded by my behaviour, of course, at home, which was very destructive. The only thing they could do at 19 was say, look, it's just not working. So the confidence, when you literally said you have to leave home, survival kicks in.
Yeah.
And so I think that sense of survival had been there from an early age. And it was like a sink or swim. You either try something and you see how it goes or not. That's certainly how I, perceived it. And so I think the confidence just naturally grew over time, of just this almost this innate need to try things out. And if they work, they work. If they don't, they don't. I think also, things got so catastrophic. Facing my own mortality at 20 was another dynamic, which, when you sort of seen that part of life or that experience within yourself, you're like, well, I've seen that. How much worse could it get? How more difficult could it get? And then you could sort of the perspective of it. I think it's just been a process over time. And over time, it's, things have got better and better and more expansive. And yes, things have also been difficult in between. But I think those early years were very difficult. Certainly the sort of between 17 and 22, 23. And I saw very difficult things very early on that within myself that I had to work through to understand. And I think confidence just came from that period of time, really, having gone through that. And just following that feeling. A lot of it is just following my feelings. And, starting something, I think that's also very typical neurodivergent, starting things out and then it kind of going off the grid either several hours later or a week later or whatever, and just embracing that. I've also learned over time that if something is really resonant, and for me certainly, that it stays, it's a multi-sensory experience. Being self-employed for sure has given me confidence as well. I've changed my approach in the last few years as well, just because I feel like I need to expand more and do something different and utilize some of the skills that I haven't been using publicly as much as I have personally, for example. So going down roads more energetic than I would have done previously. And again, it's just a process of trial and error and what feels good and what doesn't.
That's a very good point you're touching, because I feel that sometimes the confidence comes with trial and error, whereas a lot of people, they are being either like pushed into a path they don't have chosen, and then they are in environments where everything is just a given. So you have no like possibility to explore and to do the trial and error, which is cutting a lot of neurodivergence off from what they truly are and what they should embody in their authenticity, right? In their nature. So I think this is a very, very important point. And I also feel that, especially when you have the opportunity to really be with your head on in the dirt, and just drag through shit in your life, I think this is the moment, unfortunately, that is often needed for people to realize we are all mortal. I went to a death cafe yesterday, which was really interesting. Was also with we cried together. We've been laughing together. We had goosebumps together, and I think it's so important that we can live our authentic lives, but it also means that we need to set boundaries and have the shield around us to protect ourselves from the external noise, or let's say groupthink, right? Because there's certainly a lot of people sometimes out there, depending also on the environment, obviously, that don't want you to express yourself.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
It's not comfortable for them,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, there's another layer of it, isn't it? And absolutely. And I think that's always, from my side, certainly my experience of, I know that what I've done with my life has not always made people comfortable, because some of it has been very controversial, and I'm okay with that, because that is another layer of life, and I'm not the only one living this lifestyle, or having lived the lifestyles I've lived in my life. I've always been very fascinated with taboo topics, for example. Taboo topics, are part of life.
Yes.
It's part of it. And I've always been fascinated that why is this separate? Why is this judged? Why is this something that is not welcome, actually? When some taboo topics, when we talk about drugs, we talk about sex, we talk about all sorts of other different dynamics, that are part of society, that are part of who we are as human beings, are somehow not welcomed in conversation or make people feel uncomfortable. And I'm very much about embracing certain topics. I think it's very important because they are very much alive and very much in our society, and people are struggling, or people are choosing to embrace certain lifestyles because that's what they resonate with. And it's just bringing those to light, actually bringing what's in the shadows out into the light and making some things more acceptable. And I think certainly for neurodivergence that do self-medicate, that is part of the dynamic, and it should be embraced as such, that is not seen as a negative per se, but rather an acceptance of, that is part of the situation that we deal with, some of us. And there should be really more support for that, rather than it being something that looks down upon or perceived as very negative. Yeah, I mean, it can have negative effects, of course, but there's an acceptance that society misses in certain dynamics.
That deeply resonates. I think what I can say from my perspective is that when I was 12, I remember I said to my parents, because they've been asking me why I'm bringing up certain topics that I shouldn't be talking about. And I'm like, yeah, because provocation makes people think. That's what I told them when I was 12. And they said, yeah, but you shouldn't be saying this, you shouldn't be doing that. And yeah, it's kind of funny that you bring this up, because I felt like this pattern, or I see this pattern like in a lot of neurodivergence, that sometimes we have the tendency to put the finger into the wound. But also because we do have certain problems in this world, we do have certain issues. And I saw a reel the other day on Instagram where there was an ADHD girl. She was 16 or 17, and she said, I really don't understand why everyone is just sweeping shit under the rug. Like, how is it possible that everyone is just lying and faking things instead of just like pointing something out to fix it, you know? And that resonated so much, because I feel like we are in a time in 2026 now where we have a fuck ton of problems at the moment.
Yep.
A fuck ton of problems. I mean, we just have to open like the news and we see what's going on, not only geopolitically, but also everything else that's going on. We are arriving, I think, at an age where we cannot hide and fake things anymore just because they're uncomfortable. And this little girl, like 16, 17, she was on the video, she said, welcome to adult life. I hope it's not your first day on earth,
Nice.
but it's part of adulting that you have like tough conversations and that they are part of being a human being, especially an adult. So I feel that now that we have all these issues, etc., we have to talk about it. And last week I also talked in a podcast with Wolfgang that I had here that we need more role models for certain topics. When it comes to sex, when it comes to drugs, whatever, we need people that are open about it, because that also kills the shame other people carry if they have a past, or if they're still in the moment of taking drugs or doing whatever they feel they need to do. So I feel that we are very slowly getting there, but the process is very, very slow. So what do you think would be also, like, by the work that you do with clients, the most effective way to help neurodivergents to embrace this authenticity? And if they have like very specific quirks that are in a taboo area, how can they do that in the best way? What do you think?
It does take courage to stand in your own truth. And I think the topic of masking is very complex and very multi-layered. A lot of my struggles have come from the need to be authentic. So I've come from the other end, I guess. And so I think I can only imagine, because I've not really masked in my life. I can only imagine that it would need to be a step-by-step process, like a baby steps. Within sort of going slightly out of the discomfort zone, but not too much out that you're ending up with anxiety or other feelings that impact your day-to-day experience. So I would say that definitely finding people, finding your tribe, community, absolutely, safety. Feeling safe is very important. And then taking the appropriate steps to become closer to yourself, but doing it in a way that's measured, that's safe, that allows you to still function and operate on a day-to-day basis, because if you're going out too far out into, I can imagine that could be, could trigger anxiety, maybe old traumas. Yeah, I would just say slowly, step by step, little by little, and within an environment that you feel safe in.
Guided and controlled.
Yeah,
right?
and safety, emotional safety. Yeah. But ultimately, you know, the freedom and the liberation of living the life of who you are is worth exploring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of neurodivergence, not excluding myself here, we need to crash and burn to significantly make the changes. But I think if we can raise the awareness and if we can educate more and more on the topic of masking, on the topic of how certain thought processes are, etc., that neurodivergence will be able to identify, hey, I might be neurodivergent. I actually am not living the life that I want. Actually, I am trapped in a marriage that I don't appreciate. I do certain things that I actually don't want to do, but I just push through, right?
Yeah.
And I think, the baby step approach is really, really important. I also made the experience that sometimes it can come with a cost, because it means as well that you need to change your environments, which comes with changes in friendships, also like setting boundaries in families, which is, by the way, totally okay, because I think a lot of people are still scared to tell, I don't know, the mean uncle that he's mean, and you know, because he's the authority person in the family and whatnot. I think it's a complex mix of setting boundaries, getting to know yourself, getting distance from what harmed you, which environment, and then changing the environment to have a happier and fulfilled life.
Yeah,
Is that
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, and actually the environments do change. I mean, you know, as you shift, so does your environment. You know, so, you know, you're no longer aligned with maybe some of the people in your environment, whether it be the work dynamic, friendships, family, you know, whatever. It can affect people in very different ways. But ultimately, when we start to shift internally, so does our environment. Our tolerance for certain dynamics become less. And that again creates another shift. And yeah, we are at an age now, we can't continue as we have been. And, you know, there's so much magic in neurodiversity, there is so much creativity. And, you know, we don't fit into a box. I mean, none of us humans really fit into a box, actually.
No.
And whether you're neurotypical or neurodiverse, I think it's about embracing your own uniqueness and knowing that you have something very unique and something very special that you've come into this world with, and tapping into that. And that is a process, and I think a lot of it is down to feelings, what feels good inside, and following what feels good inside. And maybe outwardly, externally, that may not feel good to somebody or others in our environment, or it may not resonate in our environment in ways that we think it would or wouldn't. That's the kind of the process of exploration.
Absolutely.
But yes, we are definitely at a time where we need to embrace who we are. We can't continue shoving things under the rug. Yeah, I mean, it's anyway, you know, to feel whole, which we actually are ultimately. We are whole.
Yes.
And that's, you know, part of my work actually is about embracing our wholeness and connecting with that wholeness, and sort of clearing out the layers of the conditioning, that, the stuff that we've taken on that doesn't belong to us. And when we've all got that, and we're growing up, that's just part of what happens as we evolve as human beings.
Yes.
Yeah, we take on a whole pile of stuff that doesn't actually belong to us. And I think it's also a life's journey of shedding that. And just becoming more and more closer to who we are actually as individual human beings.
It's daunting, right? If we see like so many people, like neurotypicals or neurodivergents, are like carrying this huge backpack with so much shit in there, and it's hard to just like throw it, because it comes with a lot of loss, perceived loss. But I also learned that anything that you lose in life, like friends, for example, creates space for something new that can enter in your life.
Yeah.
You first have to clean up the closet before getting some new items, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that perceived loss. There's also, I think there's part of, there's also can be a grieving process with that, right? Some things we let go of, which are, okay, that's fine, that's gone, that's okay. But then there's, when we start to shift internally and the external environment starts to change around us, there is a sense of loss that's no longer the same anymore. And for allowing that to happen as well, but knowing that space then is opened up to far more opportunity that's more aligned with who you actually are. There's a lot to be said for creating space.
I think you said a word, maybe we can just talk about a little bit, grief, because yesterday as well at the event I was, we talked a lot about grief, and that is like something we have in all different areas, right? And sometimes we are, like in medical terms, pathologizing the grief that comes with all of us in many different areas in life. And this is just part of us and a human journey, that you are allowed to grieve the things that you don't have anymore. And if it's like, for example, if it's neurodivergents that are changing their circle of friends on a regular basis because they feel that they've outgrown that. If it's, I don't know, an item that you loved and that's not there anymore. If it's whatever it can be, there is so much grief that we experience as human beings on a regular basis, and we should be allowed to actually have this feeling and to embrace it. And I think this is also very important to the topic of authenticity, by feeling the feelings, which unfortunately there is also a whole level of indoctrination, I feel, in kindergarten, in school, to just cut them off, which is so sad, and which is, I think, the root of all evil. Why so many people are not pursuing what they want to pursue in life, because they feel that they should not be listening to themselves, which is then also like the downward spiral towards not trusting yourself, not trusting your feelings, not going for your dreams, which is, leading to ultimately a miserable life for many. And I think, thank you for sharing all of that and being such a role model, because I think that so many people not only struggle with it, but I think they also struggle with the way out. I know people, they have done traditional psychotherapy for years and they have no results. Zero results. They're spiraling around the same topics, about the same childhood traumas they have, etc., but there's no progress. And sometimes it even gets worse. I've seen people doing years of therapy and then ending up with drugs, So I think, I'm not sure how to approach this in the best way, but I think the authenticity, or to live the authenticity, also means that sometimes we have to walk through our own fire. And that really hurts and is really fucked up. And it's so dark sometimes that you don't know how to manage and how to organize yourself. But yeah, I think it's needed. There's no other way than walking through fire.
I think certainly in some ways, yes. But when I look back now and I've done different therapies, I've been fascinated with my own psyche and okay, what's inherited, what's mine, what's not mine, and certainly I think from my own philosophy, working with clients, certainly working energetically, where it's not it's not tangible per se, it's not a physical experience, it's very much an energetic experience. There's a lot of sort of images that get downloaded, there's words that come through, what I would describe as a channel. So for me, it was also very important that I know what my stuff is. I'm clear on what mine is. That way I can serve my clients better. And so from sort of the self-work I've done, going through several years of psychotherapy, the traditional route, through to the shamanic route, through to chakra healing, through to hypnotherapy, trained as a hypnotherapist as well, so behavioral hypnotherapy as well as talk hypnotherapy. And so lots of different dynamics. Tantra also came in there for a long period of time, understanding, how sexual energy moves through the body. So that's also, something that's really important. That's something that we don't talk about enough. That's, the sort of the vitality of what we have from our sexual energy and how it affects us as human beings. And when it's blocked, it tends to come out sideways in different forms, but that's another topic altogether. But just going back to sort of, the psychotherapy, I think it has its place. In my opinion, psychotherapy is very good for putting things into order, why things happened the way they did, to understand the sort of the dynamics of where things sit. But that for me, and what I've seen with my clients as well, has not been where the big change has happened. The big changes happen from other modalities, whether it be hypnotherapy, where we're working actively with the unconscious, we're rewiring patterns, from energy work itself, where we are actively going in and changing whatever the situation is from an energetic perspective. And some of those shifts can happen within hours. I mean, it's mind-blowing. But of course, everybody's unique and everybody has a different situation. But within that journey, as you say, walking through the fire, if we have support, and for me, it's just a no-brainer that we are mind, body, spirit. If we're having support on all those levels, then that walking through the fire becomes less heated than if we just had one layer of support. And so I would encourage anyone to look at embracing mind, body, spirit support rather than going in one-dimensionally. Because when you're going through transformation, you're going through change, you need to have the support on the different levels of human existence. And that actually creates the lasting change and makes the changes rather than it just being from the mental, for example.
I totally feel that. I started some energy work just a few weeks ago, and it has been life-changing on my thoughts and how I move through the world. Funny enough, I wake up in the morning, I'm super motivated, I'm happy, I'm thinking about all the things I'm thankful for, I am manifesting, I am praying, all these kind of things that I have never done before. And I feel that there is certainly a lot of people that do not believe in energy or spirits. But I think once you've gone through something very significant in your life, it exists.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not like woo-woo or bullshit people are talking. It is actually the case. And I think maybe for some it's as well scary to accept. But also that we have, for example, when we do the energy work within ourselves to shed some layers, but also getting the support from ancestors, getting the support from the universe. And I think it's also important that we have something to believe in. Whatever it is, it's important to believe in something, because otherwise I find it's going to be very complicated to to hug yourself and just be like, hey, everything will be okay, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you know, there's so much out there, and there's so many opportunities to tap into all of those layers, mind, body, spirit, in a way that is true to you. There are so many practices out there. There are so many, you know, when we talk about energetics, you know, there are so many new energy practices that are coming in now as well, because that's obviously an area that is expanding more and more, and energy medicine is starting to become part of the mainstream, because we are understanding, as they have done for millennial, that actually there is something beyond the veil that influences us rather profoundly. And I encourage anyone to look into the areas that resonate with them. And I think that's the most important thing. Whatever feels good, resonates, is the way forward. And finding your tribe, finding your community within that space as well, that you have people that you can connect with and to share and exchange with. But it's, in my opinion, important to take care of mental, physical, and energetic and emotional bodies.
Absolutely.
Simultaneously.
Absolutely.
In whatever way that works. Yeah.
And if I would ask you today, how do you live today authentically, and how do you move throughout the day in your authentic self? How would you describe that? I'm not sure if my question makes sense, but...
No, it makes sense. I'm just laughing because I'm like, well, where do I start?
Well.
I follow my feelings still, and continue to do so. There are days that are really productive, and days where I just wake and I'm going, ugh.
Not today.
Not today. And I'm okay with that. I just really flowing with my flow. I guess I recently only discovered that I'm not very good at preparation, things that require preparation. I'm actually more of an in-person, on the fly. So I would say that I've created my business, sort of the evolution of my business is very much around more about my more authentic in terms of my energy practices. So I've gone through the sort of more the hypnotherapy route. I've done energy for years. I went more into the hypnotherapy direction, but then just discovered that for me that was just not, I find it really interesting and I really enjoyed it, but there was still something that was the sort of the creativeness and the flow of that was still, I felt like I was fitting into somebody else's modality, and I know now, and I have known for a long time, that I don't fit into somebody else's modality, and I developed something myself when I was in Sydney, those earlier years, and now I've just sort of tapped back into actually developing my own flow again, and that's how I just tap into it. It's just, I've done lots of training over the years, and that has an influence of what I've built now. But ultimately, I've got my own thing, and I'm just trusting that and knowing that is, and the results have been good with clients. And so just continuing more of that. So I would say that's probably the bigger dynamic that I'm working with now. And also accepting that probably Switzerland is not my main market. That's something else that I've had to sit with for a period of time and look at what feels good. For me, here is the nature, to live here, to have this incredible natural resources around us, and so much of it. But in terms of my own sort of the market where it comes to working, I'm more engaging with the English speaking countries. I work in English anyway because that's my first language. Swiss is my second. And so again, I think that's the sort of within the working space, you know, what is feeling good for me, what feels comfortable. I know being in comfort zone is not always a good thing, I think, to evolve. It's like, okay, the English speaking is the comfort, but being here or expanding somewhere else. So that's sort of pushing myself as well. And I enjoy pushing that, my own boundaries in that regard. So that's also part of my dynamic as well, is how, you know, how can I reach other areas of the planet? So moving predominantly over to a Zoom-based business to be able to reach more people. And so, yeah, so that's really what I do for myself. And then, you know, sort of, I think, you know, the typical neurodivergent dynamic where it comes to routine. Routine is one of the classic, I think, struggles that most of us have, I would say, of keeping a routine. And I've given up having a routine a long time ago.
You made peace with it.
Yeah. So I just, you know, I just say, right, I've just got to make sure that I exercise in some form. I do, you know, obviously my meditation in some form, that I, you know, I wake up in the morning and say, okay, what do I have energy for? And, you know, I tick the boxes effectively that I would like to tick for my well-being. And that can vary from day to day what that is. I don't have a set routine. I just have certain requirements I need to fill for myself in order to feel good. And yeah, I try to do that.
That's amazing. It means you're just accepting yourself.
Yeah.
As you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
With all the energies that are sometimes higher, sometimes lower, depending on the day.
Yeah.
I think, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I had one situation, 4 years of journey, unpacking my neurodivergence and everything, long journey. Arrived at peace, mostly, not always. But I had this one situation last week where I was invited to an orchestra concert in a church. It was beautiful. It was so beautiful. But I had a lot of people around me that haven't been dancing. They didn't.
No,
But
okay.
I just, you know, I started to like move and shake my leg, and I just wanted to like, you know, get things going. And then I got the looks. This was the moment I was like, okay, Lisa, you have two choices. Either you're gonna sit still and quiet, or you just move and have fun, you know?
Yeah.
And I really had a hard time on that day to have fun.
Yeah.
Because I felt like probably that was my autism kicking in that moment. I was like, okay, I don't want to create any friction. I don't want to be looked at today. I didn't feel like showing myself on that day. So I was a little bit more quiet. But I think that sometimes if I would have been, let's say, a bit further on my journey of authenticity, I would have just moved, you know, I would have just danced, and I didn't. And then when we left, I was like, Lisa, why didn't you dance? So I think it's also like sometimes the small moments to collect where you're like, but why do you care? Why do you care about such a small minor thing? Just because they cannot have fun doesn't mean that you can't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's a reflection afterwards. Yeah. It's those the iterations when we reflect back and say, okay, well, why didn't I continue to do that? Or why didn't I just do that anyway? And that's where we grow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's wonderful. I think it's amazing that you started dancing, because actually dancing is one of the best ways to shift our energy, music and dancing.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much
Yeah,
for
thank you too.
sharing all of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anything else you would like to give as a little nudge to our audience? Like anything else that you have on mind? Maybe something I haven't asked?
Yeah, maybe we can talk just very, very, very briefly about stillness and the importance of stillness. And it doesn't mean you have to necessarily meditate, but just taking even 5 minutes in your day to just stop and sit with your body
And your thoughts.
and your thoughts, and just observe without judgment. Just observe what's happening in your physical body, maybe even your energy body if you're more sensitive to that, but also your mind. And just allow yourself just some time without judgment to just observe what's going on. And there is such a wealth of information there that sometimes we just don't stop and listen. And it's information. And whatever you experience, take it as information. And you can either do something with that, you can just sit with it, be present with it, or maybe something needs an action. But just taking that 5 minutes at a minimum, just to sit with oneself quietly without any other distractions, switch the phone off, put it on silent. We spend so much time on technology. It's so distracting from our being.
Agree.
I would say stillness is something that we all really need to have in our lives, in whatever form that takes. I mean, meditation's great, but even just lying down on the sofa, on the floor, sitting quietly somewhere, even in the middle of the day when you're working, just to take a few minutes with yourself. It's profound what we can tap into in those moments. I think we don't give ourselves enough time for that, particularly when we're working in very, very hectic, busy, stressful environments, and we have to-do lists, and we're constantly on the next thing. It's important to take that time. It is a gift. It's a gift to yourself.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing that with me, and for being here with me today and sharing all of that. I will obviously put some research and information into the show notes. And thank you very much, Isa. I appreciate it.
Thank you too.
Thanks.
Thank you.